any money. The one thing I would ask you though is, does the reverse work in a bear market, that you sell tops?
Yeah, it kind of does. It does. I think it's I have to wrap my head around it. Like, I had it in my head from the last bear market. I think it's just diminishing returns from memory as you like the when the price is going up and go to infinity, right? Literally, if the US dollar goes away, but in the bear market, it can't go to below zero. It can only go to zero, so you can only capture the gain of the price. So Bitcoin's at like $10,000 and it goes to say 3,000. You're only going to capture that move downwards, whatever that is. Like, that's $7,000 of movement. If it goes to zero, you're going to capture $10,000 of movement. So it's very diminishing return. So it's not as great to short in a bear market in that regard, especially in this kind of asset class, which is, it's essentially an adoption curve where we're going from nobody in the world having Bitcoin to majority of the world. And that by the way, is 2% of the world own it right now. So you can imagine the growth that is to come. We're, 1994, I think, in terms of internet adoption. That was when we had the 140 million people using Bitcoin, or in that case, the internet back then. It's higher than that. That was January, by the way. That was the January figure. So, trying to short the internet, it's not a great strategy. You might get lucky timing it right over the next few weeks or months before and the bear markets don't last more than 12 months. So yeah, I mean, and remember the last bull market was 100x, and the bear market went down from 20,000 to 3,000. So there was barely a $16,500 move. You're not going to do the kind of ridiculous returns you get on a long market. So you get these people like Parabolic Trav who will just disappear from the whole scene and only pop up when the bull market's there because he's on. He'll just go and take his holiday in the Bahamas or whatever he does.
3-year holiday.
Yeah, exactly. Because a lot of work shorting a bear market, and you're playing chicken with freight train, really. Yeah.
For smaller gains, that kind of makes sense. Yeah, that kind of makes sense. That's one hell of a wick we're seeing right now, dude.
Yeah, I'm constantly
Should you be trading this?
I'm kind of in a neutral position right now. I just moved out of all trades, but that looks like it's going to move up, isn't it?
Well, it depends. It depends, because there's a couple of things. Like, for example, I mean, Tesla are in a very good position, right? They bought a bunch of Bitcoin. It's turned out that they've made more money on Bitcoin in this couple of weeks than they've made in the last year selling cars. And we've got no idea if someone like Elon Musk is getting that kind of FOMO you get after you first make a bit of money with Bitcoin. He could be thinking, we should put some more in, or I should put some SpaceX money in. We don't know if Michael Saylor's raised his money and thinks, right, this is the opportunity to deploy that 900 million. We just don't know. We don't know. The other thing that's on my mind is that I feel like there's something different going on this year. These dips are getting eaten up really quickly. And I don't know what's going on. Perhaps you're seeing something, but I'm seeing a lot more people this time who are saying to me that I don't want to sell my Bitcoin ever. And we've got this maturing market for borrowing and lending, the likes of BlockFi, the Unchained Capitals, the Ledens, the Genesis. And I wonder if people these days are thinking, I don't want to sell my Bitcoins, so I'm buying them, I'm holding forever, and I'm just going to leverage against it. So I'm wondering if there's these dips that get eaten back up. There's something going on there based on the fact there isn't that many sellers. It's hard to wipe out that many sellers because there aren't many. I don't know. You might be seeing. Are you reading anything different?
I'm reading the same. There's a number of touch points regarding that. Like I did a study a while back. I just mentioned earlier. It was really a measure of this. That there's this term called reflexiveness. I think it's a George Soros term, which is essentially this feedback loop where in commodity markets where as the asset price goes up, then there's less selling, and it's a feedback loop, and it tends to go more exponential. So I did a little calculation from the on-chain data we had, and you can kind of measure the capital that's been stored in Bitcoin, because you can kind of see when the purchaser bought and what they paid for it, and that was actually the capital they put in. So you can do a ratio of the capital that has been stored in Bitcoin and how that tracks upwards versus how the price moves upwards, and therefore you get this ratio of how much the actual price goes up to the amount of buying that was done with it. And it's been, it didn't really support the theory. We always thought in the bull market, less and less people would actually sell because it's going up. But actually what happened, from the data, you can see that actually people did sell into it. These old time whales we can tell it was the old time whales because you can see the age of those coins being sold. They bought it like pennies. And so they sold into the first bull runs, and then they sold into the 2013 run, they sold into the 2017 run, and across the span of that bull market, the dollar gain of Bitcoin was static compared to how much money was coming in. Yet this one's been unique because that is ramping up. As the price is going up, there's less capital needed to push it up even further because there's fewer people selling into it. So I'm seeing that on the data for sure.
So you're talking about essentially it's a redistribution from OGs.
Yeah.
Every cycle, there's some of them probably don't want to sell. Some have got less left to sell. For a range of reasons.
I was saying, like, say you're 30 and you bought into Bitcoin 10 years ago, and now you've got like $500 million of Bitcoin, and you're 40. You probably got 20 good years to spend that money. So you're not really in the game of collecting more Bitcoins because it's going up exponentially. You're in the business of selling and trying to figure out what to do with that money because you've now got the problem of having too much money without, probably without a project to spend it on, like maybe Elon Musk would have a project to spend that kind of money on to get us to Mars. But so it's I think it's a different mindset, and certainly the OGs have constantly been selling, and that's been creating a very nice distribution, which is flies in the face of this FUD that the popular media like to throw at Bitcoin, where it's controlled by a very select few. It's what we're actually seeing from the data is that it's being distributed, and more so. But
it's that never sell narrative that's coming up. Like somebody said it's a few different things. Like Michael Saylor said it quite a bit about that. Why would you sell a pristine asset? You can leverage this. Like he can borrow money in the markets at 0%, right? I spoke with Jamie, the CEO of Hut Mining. She was talking about the fact that to cover certain capital expenditures or costs, they just borrow against their Bitcoin. They don't want to sell their Bitcoin. And I'm feeling similar, Willy. Like I had this long conversation with my son yesterday because he was like, "Oh, Dad, but you could buy that car you wanted or whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, I could." But, this Bitcoin might go up to X price. But what I can do is I can leverage against it. I think it's slightly different. Like if you want to buy like a house, I think it's slightly different because the loan you might get against the Bitcoin is like really expensive. And especially if it's towards the end of a macro cycle. But at the same time, I did an interview with Dan. We talked about the super cycle. And I've talked to a few people. There does seem to be this change in mentality now that people aren't thinking, oh, I need to sell my Bitcoin. There's a lot of people now talking about what can I do to not sell my Bitcoin and just keep holding it forever?
It does make sense, right? Because it's so scarce, and if fiat is going to self-destruct, and I do think that we're coming into a new era of money, Like, I don't think it's too crazy to think that the structure of our money is about to be invented. I mean, Ray Dalio will talk about this as reset of the long-term debt cycle. Every time, every like 100 years, we reset the money. So maybe we reinvent it with something like Bitcoin that backs it, or Bitcoin becomes it. I think a lot of maximalists think that. So if that's the case, yeah, you're never going to sell. Yeah, it's valid. I think we're in a, I don't know when that will happen. I think in the shorter term, I honestly don't understand the structure of what's happening behind the scenes when you go and get maybe a BlockFi loan, and you over collateralize your Bitcoin. So you're essentially giving it to another player. They're figuring out how to make money on that, by having, more Bitcoins than the loan you've taken out. But essentially you're doing a margin position. You're buying, you're getting a loan on, of fiat in this case, on your Bitcoin. So you're probably going to be more sensitive to selling your Bitcoins now, because a lot rides on it. If the Bitcoin price starts to drop, you're probably going to call in that loan, or you're going to sell your Bitcoins. You'll probably sell more Bitcoins because you've grabbed a loan to buy some stuff.